If Claude has started cutting you off mid-conversation, sometimes within minutes of starting, you are not imagining it. This started happening after a change Anthropic made in late March 2026, and it is hitting a lot of people using Claude for real work. In this video, I am going to show you exactly why it is happening and 5 ways to fix it immediately. Most people assume the fix is upgrading their plan. It is not. Let me show you the fixes first, then I will explain what actually changed underneath. Fix number 1, switch from Opus to Sonnet. This one surprises people because most users default to Opus. It is the flagship model. It sounds like the obvious choice for serious work. But here's what that assumption is costing you. Opus is significantly more computationally expensive to run, which means it burns through your session limit faster than Sonnet does for the same amount of work. Switching to Sonnet can extend your usable session time by 30 to 50%, depending on how heavily you are prompting. That is not a small difference. On a plan where you were hitting a wall at the 45-minute mark, that switch alone could get you to 60 or 70 minutes before the same wall appears. And here is the part most people do not expect. Sonnet 4.6 is not a downgrade for the majority of tasks. It scores 79.6% on the SWE bench coding benchmark, within 1 point of Opus on most real-world work. For writing, research, summarizing, structured analysis, the output quality is comparable. The session length is not. Sonnet runs faster, costs less per token, and lasts longer in a session. The only scenarios where Opus clearly earns the extra resource cost are the most demanding reasoning tasks. Extended multi-step logic, very complex coding problems, situations where you genuinely need the deepest possible reasoning at every exchange. For everything else, Sonnet is the smarter choice right now. If you are hitting limits on Opus and have not tried Sonnet, that is where to start. It is the single fastest fix on this list. Fix number 2 is called caveman prompting, and once you understand why it works, you will use it automatically. Every word in your prompt costs tokens. Long conversational prompts, the kind that feel natural to write, burn through your session budget before Claude has written a single word back. Caveman prompting means stripping your prompt to the minimum needed to get the result. Instead of, "Could you please help me draft a professional email explaining the project will be delayed by 2 weeks due to resource constraints," keeping the tone apologetic but confident. You write draft client email. Project delayed 2 weeks. Resource issue. Tone apologetic but confident. Same output, a fraction of the tokens. The place this compounds most is follow-up messages. Instead of, "That looks great. Could you also add a short section covering the timeline, maybe 3 or 4 sentences, keeping the same tone you write? Add timeline section, 3-4 sentences, match tone." Across 10 follow-up exchanges in a session, that difference is significant. The output does not suffer. The session length improves. And the next fix is the one almost nobody is doing, but it makes a bigger difference than most people expect. Fix number 3 is session hygiene, and this is the one almost nobody is doing, but it makes a bigger difference than most people expect. Every message in a conversation carries the full history of that conversation as context. The longer a session runs, the more tokens every new message costs just to maintain that context overhead, before Claude has written a single word in response. By the time you are 50 exchanges deep in a conversation, a meaningful portion of your session budget is being spent just keeping the history alive. For distinct tasks, starting a fresh conversation is almost always more efficient than continuing an old one. Finished a research task and now starting a writing task? New conversation. You lose nothing meaningful and reset your context overhead back to 0. Stay in the same session only when Claude genuinely needs to remember decisions made earlier in the thread, when continuity actually serves the work. Otherwise, fresh start every time. This habit alone can add significant runway to your daily Claude usage without changing anything about how you prompt. Fix number 4, time your sessions. Anthropic was specific about when limits tighten. Weekdays 5 in the morning to 11 in the morning Pacific time. That is 8 to 2 Eastern. If your heaviest Claude work happens during that window, you're hitting peak demand at the same time as everyone else. Shifting intensive sessions outside those hours, early morning before it or afternoon after it, gives you noticeably more runway on the same plan. Not always possible depending on your schedule, but for anyone with flexibility, it is the simplest change with immediate impact. Fix number 5 is for when you actually hit the wall mid-task. The instinct is to start a new conversation and copy everything over. That is usually the least efficient approach. Before you do anything else, ask Claude to summarize where it is and what still needs to be done. A tight summary costs far fewer tokens than a full context copy. Take that summary into your next session as the opening message. You keep continuity, lose almost no context, and get back to full speed in seconds. If you are midway through a complex document or coding task, ask Claude to write a structured handoff note. What has been decided, what remains, what the constraints are. That note becomes the foundation of the next session, and you pick up exactly where you left off. Those are the 5 fixes. Now let me explain what is actually going on underneath, because understanding it changes how you think about Claude long-term. Last month, an Anthropic technical staffer named Tariq Shahipar posted that the company was adjusting how 5-hour session limits work for free, pro, and max subscribers during peak hours. The specific window, weekdays, 5 in the morning to 11 in the morning, Pacific time. During those hours, users now move through their session limits faster than before. Anthropic confirmed that roughly 7% of users would hit limits they had never hit before. It sounds small until you think about who that 7% is. It is not casual users asking ChatGPT-style questions. It is the heaviest users, developers, writers, researchers, people who sit down with Claude for extended work sessions, people who depend on it to stay productive. Team and enterprise customers were not affected by the change at all, and there was no in-app notification, no email, no banner announcing any of this. You just started hitting walls earlier than you used to and had to go searching for an explanation. The frustration at how this was communicated is entirely justified, and Anthropic has not addressed it directly. Now the benchmark controversy, because this deserves a straight answer. In the past week, a company called BridgeMind posted that Claude Opus 4.6 had dropped from 2nd to 10th on their hallucination leaderboard, with accuracy falling from 83.3% to 68.3% in a single week. It went viral. Claude is being nerfed was everywhere on X, and I understand why it spread. A drop that dramatic, on a metric Anthropic highlights as a strength, sounds like hard evidence. Here is what the data actually shows. The 83.3% result came from a run on 6 tasks. The 68.3% result came from a completely different run on 30 tasks. An independent researcher named Paul Calcraft went back and compared only the 6 tasks that overlap between both runs. On those 6 tasks, Claude's score moved from 87.6% to 85.4%. A 2-point shift that falls within normal statistical variance for any AI model, especially without repeated runs to account for randomness. The viral comparison was not measuring the same thing twice. Calcraft called it, and I think this is exactly right, incredibly bad science. That said, the frustration underneath that post is not entirely wrong. Anthropic did change how Claude's adaptive thinking works after launch. The default reasoning effort was set to medium, meaning the model does not always run at the depth it did during early testing. A separate analysis of nearly 7,000 Claude code sessions found reasoning depth dropped noticeably by late February. The model was reading less code before attempting fixes, which matters a lot for complex engineering work. So the honest answer is this: the 68.3% versus 83.3% comparison is not valid. Claude is still one of the strongest AI tools available for sustained, complex work. The writing quality, the ability to hold long, structured tasks, the nuance in how it follows instructions, none of that has gone away. What has changed is that you now need to be deliberate about how you use it. You cannot burn through a session carelessly the way early adopters could before these limits tightened. The 5 fixes in this video are not workarounds for a broken tool. They are habits that make a powerful tool last longer and work harder for you. Start with 2 things today. Switch to Sonnet if you're on Opus, and strip your next 5 prompts down to the minimum before you send them. Do those 2 things in your next session, and you will feel the difference before the session is over. Add the other 3 fixes as you build the habit, and your sessions will stretch further than they have in months. If this is the kind of breakdown that actually helps, no hype, no press release summary, just what works, that is what this channel does every week. Subscribe and I will see you in the next one.